Hello, everyone. Today we have a guest, first time guest in our channel. His name is Andre. He works at Microsoft. I will let him introduce himself and we are going to look into Copilot for security today. Hey, Andre.
Hey, Sushan. Hey, everyone.
Hey,
My name is Andre. I'm a security technical specialist at Microsoft New Zealand. And for the past few months, I've been working with my team on scaling up on my Copilot for security. Just this week, I became a Copilot for security champion. And I'm excited to share what's available on the platform and what is the benefits for you as a SOC analyst.
that's awesome. Thanks, Andre. The format today is very light. I myself don't know anything about Copilot for security, so I'm gonna ask a bunch of questions to Andre about like educating myself. So at the same time, you yourself can learn what is Copilot as well. So Andre, before we begin, how can the audience reach out to you if they want to touch base with you and understand what you do yourself?
Good question, Sushan. So I keep a channel on YouTube. It's called Cloud and Sec with Andre Camillo. I share some of these tips on my channel, but I also am very active on LinkedIn
Yeah.
and on my blog through Medium. So if you guys can want to reach out, I'll put a link. I'll send a link to the description for you to
Yeah,
put in the
awesome.
description.
So what I will do is I'll mention Andrew's YouTube channel, his LinkedIn,
Yes.
and his amazing blogs where he posts all these security-related content. So you can always reach out and follow him for additional details on anything related to security or Microsoft technology products. All right, Andre, it's over to you. So educate me on what is Copilot. What is security for Copilot, or is it Copilot for security?
That's a good start
Let's start
because
there.
yeah, initially we announced the product as Security Copilot,
Yeah,
and for the past few months, up
yeah,
until January, we were calling it Security Copilot. But
yeah,
uh, there was a shift in the naming of all our Copilot brand products, and
yeah.
now we're calling it Copilot for Security.
Copilot
Very
for
excited.
security, not security for Copilot.
Perhaps I can show you what it looks like and what's the experiences that SOC analysts can essentially go through when using it. What do you think?
100%. So we are super excited. I'm super excited to see it for
Awesome.
the first time.
All right, so let's go ahead and understand a little bit more about how to set it up and what's the charging or charge of the service like. There's two important things to understand here. Okay, so the first thing I want to showcase is how to create the needed capacity for Copilot for Security. Copilot for Security is an Azure service. Okay, so that's
Mhm.
important to understand.
So
But
users have to go to Azure portal first to access it.
there's two ways.
Okay.
This through Azure is a viable
Yeah.
option, absolutely. So that's what I'm showcasing on screen right now.
Okay.
If you go to Azure and look for Copilot for security,
Yeah.
you're going to see Copilot for security compute capacities. This is a new
Yeah.
service in Azure, just went to GA 1st of April.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. When you get here, you can create what we call the compute unit for Copilots for security to work. And that's fundamental for it to essentially start working because what you consume is this compute units per hour. Okay.
Okay.
Now, so first thing we need to do is create our Copilot for security compute unit. We go ahead and set up my resource group here. When we're creating a capacity, we do have a choice of 4 locations to process your prompts. This is very important from a well data processing perspective, legality perspective, understanding where possible customer data is going to, if you are dealing with any of that in your SOC. So then you can choose between US, Australia, Europe, or UK. There is a burst checkbox that you can choose if you want
Mhm.
to perhaps use another location in case that preferred location is at capacity.
Mhm.
And finally, the last thing you need to set up here is the number of security compute units, which the minimal amount is 1, and
Okay.
it can go up to 100 of them.
So
Now,
compute unity is like a server instance in the backend, like
yeah,
a config.
it's
Okay.
it's similar because a server instance,
Yeah.
it's just potentially just some processing power as well,
Right. Right.
right? If we think about it at a very low level.
Right. So can we know like what's a single compute unit represents? Like is it like a bunch of CPU and a RAM, a combination of that? So how does
Great,
somebody know what is a one compute unit mean?
great question, Sushan.
Yeah,
Secure compute unit is a range of all of these
all of
different
that. Yeah,
all of compute capabilities that we offer in order
yeah,
to process tokens, if you will,
yeah,
from a large language model.
yeah, yeah.
Now it's
Awesome.
yeah. So just a little more details on that.
Yeah,
It's very important to understand that a secure compute unit doesn't mean you're going to get a specific amount of prompts that you can send to the platform, or it doesn't grant you necessarily just 1 hour of view use.
yeah,
Although you're paying per hour, as it's detailed here,
yeah,
4 USD dollars per SCU per hour,
yeah.
you might consume that compute unit in a lot less time if you're using with very complex prompts, for example. So
Mm-mm.
it's a little more nuanced than just compute per hour. Okay, yeah. So from here, you have to choose how many of these SCUs you want.
Yeah,
If you're just using for tests, start with one.
yeah,
For customers, that varies, but the recommendation varies per customer and the size of the SOC and how many analysts are
yeah.
using Copilot for security.
Right.
Now,
If we
this
go to
security,
Azure pricing calculator,
yes,
can we know how much it is going to cost? You're going to show that as well.
we can go there,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But as you can see here,
Yeah.
we have an estimated monthly cost at the bottom.
Oh, nice.
If I
Oh, now I can
increase
see it much better.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. It'll multiply that versus the amount of SCUs
Yeah.
that we have.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, this estimated monthly cost is assuming that we have this SCU provisioned for 24 hours for the
Mm.
entire month, right?
All right.
Now, what happens is you can automate. There's a lot of MVPs and Microsoft employees who are creating ways to utilize essentially logic apps to create and delete capacities
Mm-mm.
according to a schedule. So that monthly cost would actually go down because you're deprovisioning when you don't need it, and
Mm-mm.
that's an important concept as well, right? So this estimated is only if you leave this SEU provisioned for the entire month.
Month.
Yeah.
Okay. Even if you use it or not, you're gonna pay for
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction because generally in consumption we talk about using a resource and consuming and being charged for the consumption.
Yeah.
Copilot for security is actually a provision model. So we provision it per hour. So if you provision for this hour, at the time I acknowledge that I have understood the
Yeah.
agreement
Yeah.
and I reveal and create, I'll start getting billed essentially, even
Okay.
if I don't use it.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, let me go ahead and enter one, reveal and create. After I do that, after a few seconds, um, the SCU will be provisioned to my tenant.
All right.
Now, what you're going to see on screen here is the next step. Okay, so since we created this unit in Azure, we have
Yeah.
to take this next step. This next step is essentially a pivot to the dedicated Copilot for Security portal. Okay,
Okay.
um, now if you remember before I started doing all of that in Azure, I mentioned there were two ways to create Copilot for Security capacity.
Yeah.
The first one was Azure, like I mentioned,
Yeah.
but you can also do it directly from this portal. Okay.
Yeah.
But since we did it in Azure, we have to pivot to this portal to finish off the setup. So that's the
Right.
one caveat when you're doing it from Azure. Yeah. If you
Okay.
do it directly from here, you don't have to pivot that way. This
Yeah.
is what the screen would look like, yeah, if I
Yeah.
didn't have any capacity. So I would be
Right.
able to create the same things right from here.
Right. If I could ask one more question,
Yeah.
if anybody is in the security team in their organization, if they want to do it, do they need a special Azure permissions required to perform this task?
That's a great question. They will need administrator and privileged access to create the SEO. Yes.
Right.
And
What sort of an
after
administrator? Security administrator is fine.
yeah, security
Oh, okay.
administrator is fine because As a matter of fact, when you create the resource and you stand up Copilot for Security for the first time, let me
Yep.
do that right here. What we're going to see is the people have access to the platform. Okay.
Yep.
And why this ties in very well with what you're saying is after we provision the SU, we set it up within
Yep.
Copilot for Security, we can come into owner settings
Yep.
and I can see, well, essentially, sorry, we can go into role assignment
Yep.
and we can see all the people who have access to manage the billing
Right.
within owner. And it says here, essentially, well, you need Azure contributor,
Mm-hmm.
but also security administrator and global administrators there's can do that too.
Okay.
And when we also first set up Copilot for Security, we're going to have contributors. And by default, what we currently have is all of the organization have access as contributor. So I had originally a third option in here, which was all of my organization.
Mm.
But I think the recommendation would be to just remove that because when you have that enabled, Copilot for Security will be available widespread to anyone who have security reader roles, for example. Right? That's what's in contributor, and
Okay.
what that means is when they start creating or opening up portals such as Entra, potentially Purview,
Mm-hmm.
when the embedded experience is available, they're going to start seeing the embedded experience. Perhaps from here we can have a look at what Copilot for Security looks like,
Yep.
and in the standalone, yeah, let's do that. Okay, so what you're seeing on screen is what we call this standalone Copilot for Security portal,
Yep.
and from it, this is where you can get the most value out of it as an operator, if you will. And why I say that is because from here, you can go straight into past sessions that you've interacted with Copilot for Security.
Yep.
Um, so
So
everything you're seeing on screen,
does it retain all the information? How long does it retain?
yeah, great question. It retains sessions for up to 90 days. And
Okay.
yeah, it's very important to say this because you notice I just provisioned this new SCU, and
Correct.
yet all of the past sessions are still kept in here.
Right.
I started using it on the first day, as you can see.
Right.
But all of my past sessions are here. And if I wanted to continue working on them with this new SCU, I can, in
Yeah.
fact, right? So
Right.
I can just open any of them up and then
Right.
continue my investigation. Yeah.
So, for my understanding, so your past sessions are the one which you prompted something and got some responses. Is that the session what you mean?
Great question, too. So,
Yeah.
what are sessions?
Yeah.
Yes. So we can create manually. We can manually create sessions. You can see
Yeah.
on screen here.
Yeah.
But we can also, when we're investigating incidents in Defender XDR, it's going to generate sessions whenever we open up an incident.
Okay.
So that's also considered a session. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
For example,
Yeah.
and let me pivot to uh, to what we call the embedded experience, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about sessions here. Like I said, you can manually create it from this standalone portal. But if I were a SOC analyst dealing with Defender XDR, so let me jump into Defender XDR portal. So what you're seeing is the Defender XDR portal.
Yeah.
If I, as an agent or analyst, open up any of these incidents, when I have an SCU, Copilot for Security Compute Unit enabled, I'm going
Yeah.
to get the Copilot experience, the embedded experience, right? So you can see
Right.
it's automatic, right?
Right. Oh, this
Now,
is very nice. Yeah.
yeah. And why it's so important to bring this up when I'm talking about sessions is because when I jump back into this standalone and I refresh the list, we're going to see a new session in here, and that's just been created. As you can see, the guided response, like I said, this
Yeah.
is one session,
Yeah.
and the incident summarization is another session. So
Right.
that's important. So if I open any of them up in the standalone,
Yeah.
I can continue that session. I can send natural language prompts and text to better interact with it.
This is great. So now we know where to kickstart a Copilot for security, and then what are the sessions are? How can you like use this to investigate something?
Sure.
Can you
Yeah.
show a typical use case scenario where somebody is actually going and using this to investigate something?
Yeah. Okay, Sushan. So there's two ways for you to use it naturally. You can continue the investigation from what I just showed you
Yeah,
from Defender XDR. So
yeah,
imagine I'm hunting, I'm going through an investigation, I see Copilot pop up. From here, I can essentially pivot to the standalone portal.
yeah,
This is when I open in Copilot for security.
yeah.
It would just open the same information and session in Copilot for security.
Mm-hmm,
This is a great way to continue an investigation.
mm-hmm,
However, I think from a broader perspective, how would then I start interacting with the tool and making the most out of it, right?
mm-hmm.
Let's start a new session. Let's go to my sessions
Yeah,
and let's create a new session. There you go. So this is a new session from scratch.
yeah,
There's no incidents, nothing in here. So what can I do with Copilot? Now the tool, it's well essentially a prompt bar at
yeah,
the bottom,
yeah,
and there are a few icons in here, and they aim to make the SOC analyst understand more what they can do, right? So
yeah,
within prompts, we actually get a list of everything that the system can do. Okay, so that's great for anyone that's starting out and that wants to know what they can do with the new session, for example. They starting from scratch. What can they
yeah,
do? Look, with there's essentially, let me scroll. There we go. There's just some important information here at the top. There's two things that we can learn from the prompts: all the system capabilities. So it's a long list of everything that the system can do.
yeah,
So you can search for anything. If you want to look about users, you just type in users and you see what potential activities you can do right from here. Or you can also check out the prompt books. Now, I didn't talk about prompt books yet.
yeah,
Prompt books are, like I briefly mentioned it. So
yeah.
essentially, there are chained prompts that have been created by either Microsoft or
Yeah.
your organization, or even
Mhm.
just yourself for your own workflow. And you
Right.
can summon these prompt books to act however you want them. It's
Yeah.
an automation of sorts.
Is
So
one more follow-up question to that prompt book. Can I access prompt books created by external users or external party, like other organization I can bring in? Or is it when I create and save it, it's just my prompt book? Like, oh, right. There's a
yeah,
library.
there is a library. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. So this is everything that's essentially created by default. I didn't
Yeah.
customize it in yet,
Yeah.
but you can see my prompt books, you can
Yeah.
see my organizations,
Yeah.
Microsoft's, and you could, well, essentially create tags to find whatever else you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these are open source essentially. You can create prompt books. If anyone shares their idea with you and their prompt book with you, you can replicate them here
Right.
essentially. There's not a store per se for prompt book, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so but the community around Copilot for Security really be around the plugins,
Yeah.
and I was gonna get to that on this next icon here on the prompt bar on how you can start interacting with it, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great. So let's go look into that first.
yeah, cool. So also how you can get started, right? So what you're seeing on screen is really impressive, first and foremost because I haven't set up anything beforehand, right? So
Hmm.
as soon as I enabled SCU, it automatically looked at my access, the access my user has, and it already turned on whatever I have access and whatever is enabled in my environment. So I already can prompt Copilot for Defender XDR, for Entra, for user information in Entra, for device information in Intune, for Sentinel information, and use other plugins or skills, if you will, right? Just by default. But as I scroll down, we can see other, and this is a long list that is always growing, by the way,
Hmm.
of external plugins that you can integrate into your Copilot. Now, this is going back to the community and how you can customize and bring information from other people from the industry. This would
Hmm.
probably be it, right? First and foremost, there are these other approved plugins, if you will,
Hmm.
but at the very bottom, you can add your customized plugins. Okay, so that's
Yes.
important as well. So when we think of custom plugins, you can just use open source methods of LLM plugins such as OpenAI JSON manifest, or even a custom Copilot for Security plugin that is meant to be utilized and created your own plugin, if you will. Okay, so when we think about, hey, what else can we do, or how can the community act together to enhance the capability of Copilot for Security, that's the answer, right?
Oh,
So
it's great.
just yeah, so just you can upload your JSON file, and what that JSON will contain, of course, is a reference of actions and potentially third party and open source tools that your Copilot for Security will be able to access, right? So that's important to understand.
Right. There is no charges for these, adding a plugin and using it.
No, adding the plugin is free. It's included in the service,
Yeah.
if you will. However, think about whatever other infrastructure you're utilizing. That depends on what you're
Right.
doing, right?
Right.
If
Right.
you're using a service from another provider, you probably have to have that licensed.
Yeah.
Or if you're using a API for an open source, you
Yeah.
probably have to pay for that API key. So yeah. Another thing that I think it's great to know before you start prompting is
Yeah.
the files option, right? So this is in preview, as you can see screen,
Yeah.
but you can essentially upload files such as internal policy or guidelines that your SOC analyst should follow,
Yeah.
and you can summon them in your prompts. Think about potentially a guideline from NIST, for example, where you can upload that file and you can make questions to that file, of course, in the prompt. And the answer you get, the recommendations you get, will be grounded on top of that file or policies that your organization has. So it's a
Hmm.
great way to make sure that Copilot is grounded or bound to your organization policies.
Okay.
Okay, as an example, I just uploaded a NIST document, so a
Yeah.
guideline for cybersecurity improvement, for example. This is a document from 2018, as you can see. And
Yeah.
well, from this point onwards, I can make questions, and it will essentially leverage that for answers. Okay.
Right.
Now, once I set all of these up, I set my plugins, I set the files that I need to potentially use in my SOC processes. What I
Yeah.
need to do next is start prompting, right?
So the file is all the question is going to be grounded on that file which you uploaded, like the
So
questions.
you can reference it
Yeah.
essentially, usable by some of the questions you make. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when you're thinking about investigating on Copilot, there are good practices to prompting, right? And Microsoft makes this guidance available as well. Let me pull it up. Okay, so for you to learn how to prompt Copilot effectively, I highly recommend you have a look at this learn.microsoft.com content, describe Microsoft Copilot for Security. One of the contents in here is describe the elements of an effective prompt. And this is it, right? So this image is great because it explains four components that you need to have in mind when you're creating a prompt. So try to be goal specific, know what you're trying to achieve and get to, understand the context and add context. Set the expectations. If you need a report, state what kind of report. Is it an executive report? Make sure you tell it about it. And lastly, the source. This is very important because it avoids Copilot for Security from trying to find information in an irrelevant plugin, for example. It just
Yeah.
avoids potential prompts that are wasted, if you will. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, with all of these in mind, we can start prompting, right? So we just got to the office and I'm trying to learn what should I prioritize from my Defender XDR incident list, for example. So we can just ask it. Let's go ahead and do that. So just explaining a little bit of what I'm asking. I'm being very specific and contextualizing my ask, right? So I'm asking Copilot to to tell me what incidents I should prioritize from Defender XDR. So I'm calling out the plugin there. So that's good. I have a goal in mind. I have contextualized within incidents. And I said that I was specific about the representation. So create a list from high to low priority. Let's go ahead and send it. Now, when I send it, it's going to go through a number of checks and a number of processing methodology, which it's worth explaining. It's going to take some time, right? So, but it's all following the responsible AI approach that Microsoft has. All
Mhm.
that is in here follows the transparency that is included in the responsible AI model. So we can see the amount of time this is taking to respond. And
Mhm.
at every step, we are documenting the what Copilot for Security is doing. For example, the first thing it does is understand the prompt, understand what plugin it needs to connect to in order to answer for that prompt. In this case, it chose Defender XDR. Great. So I did my part correctly. It's also looking at the request itself. It's processing it however it's required. And then lastly, it's preparing that response by going to the LLM, large language model, and then
Yeah.
having the checks run on top of it. Yeah. So there you go. So you can expand each and every step to understand
Yeah.
what it's being done.
Yeah.
And you get a list that you asked for at the end, right? So here are the incidents you should prioritize today. It tells
Yeah.
me the incident ID. I didn't tell it to tell
Yeah.
me the incident ID, but great to see that.
Yeah.
Gives me a little bit of what's up with that particular incident, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. And it's done from high severity to low, which is what I asked of it. And information is the last. Perfect.
Yeah. So
That's
typically, if I may ask you a question, so typically, if without Copilot for Security, an agent would need to go to a dashboard and do it all by themselves. Imagine if they have like heaps of incident, they will be no clue where to start and what to prioritize, things like that, right?
absolutely. The alternative to interacting with Copilot for Security would actually have to potentially go through the list of Defender XDR
Right,
incidents.
right, right.
Um, yeah, or even looking at Sentinel or whatever other tools they use to
Yeah.
investigate.
Sometimes that can be overwhelming, and you don't know where to start
Yes,
and things like that. Yeah.
that's right. So uh, that's a great question. So Copilot for Security comes in to help with being that interface that is looking at all that for the
Yeah.
analyst. Yeah. Now, what's also relevant from Copilot's standalone experience that I didn't get into yet is what can you do with this prompt, right? So you
Yeah.
can copy all of this prompt and share it however you want, wherever you want, of course. You can
Yeah.
export the response if it's relevant,
Yeah.
but you can also pin this response
All
to what
right.
we call a pin board. So this pinboard is essentially a list of relevant prompts that you've interacted with Copilot for Security in this session. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So it is expected in large investigations you're going to go back and forth multiple times. You might want to pin the most relevant prompts from your investigation in here.
Right.
What this will also allow you to do is to share your session. So your session is not just yours; it might be your team's. So
Mm.
think about how you can, share this session with another analyst or an incident lead, someone that needs to have a look at what's being done, for example, or someone that just needs to access the session to create the next step. So perhaps they are responsible for creating the executive summary of what you're working on, right? So
Mm-hmm.
give them access. They'll be able to use Copilot for Security to generate a executive summary, for example.
Right. That's great.
Yeah, and lastly, you can export the whole pinboard
Yeah.
through Word or email or copy the entire pinboard. So from here, Sushan, we could actually decide to start using prompt books, for example. So imagine the next step for me as an incident investigator or a SOC analyst is to actually dive deeper into this incident. So I know that the incident ID is 19119, and what I can start doing is leveraging prompt books. This is from me knowing what to do, right, with the platform. So I
Yep.
can go into prompt books, call out this Microsoft 365 Defender, the old
Yep.
name of Defender XDR,
Yep.
for investigation, and I can then just enter the Defender incident ID. So each prompt book, as you can see here, can have inputs. So this input can be customized. So when you're creating your prompt book, you can tell it, oh, I want to enter whatever information you want, and then you can leverage that information elsewhere in your prompt chain, if you will. Okay, so in this case, I'm getting that Defender incident ID and I'm passing it through to my first prompt. My first prompt in this prompt book is to summarize the Defender incident, for
Yep.
example. And then the second that's going to happen automatically as part of this prompt book is going to list out or tell about the entities associated. What are the reputation scores? So it's also leveraging other plugins. So Defender Threat Intelligence in this case. It's using Entra about the authentication mode. So see how prompt books are very powerful in terms of utilizing more than just one plugin. Whereas when you're prompting it, you have to be specific and you have to essentially gear your question towards one specific plugin. But
Mm.
with prompt books, you can actually be broader and wider in what you're trying to achieve, and of course, get more use cases, if you will, with much more information from many different plugins.
Yep.
All right. So let's go ahead and run this particular prompt book.
Yep.
Okay, so that prompt book is now all done. If I go back to the responsible AI steps here at the top, I can see that it took roughly 40 seconds. It chose incident analysis, process the request, prepare the response, and so on and so forth. Right, so see, you can see all the steps it took, and of course, we can see the relevant information and the output from it right here. Yeah. So from here onwards, it's going to continue the investigation as well. So as I scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see here the continuation of the prompt book, right? So you see the entities associated with that incident. It's a new
Hmm.
prompt, as you can see here. Get all the information that we need. Uh, Further down, we can see the other steps, such as reputation score for IP
Hmm.
addresses that are potentially reported in that incident. There might not be IP addresses, which is the
Hmm.
case for my incident, and it's going to go on and execute all those different prompts that I mentioned there at the beginning.
And can
Prompt
you
book,
ask follow-up question as well?
you absolutely can. After it finishes the chain of prompts here,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
gonna see how we're gonna still be able to use the prompt bar here to
Right.
ask follow up questions.
Right.
Right?
And I can see that when you hover your mouse over these sections, there is an edit option as well. Does that mean
Yep.
you can edit and modify the question and things like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
So
fantastic.
that can absolutely be done.
Yeah.
It generates. Well, you can edit the prompt and it'll generate a new answer for you. Of
Yeah.
course, this is this is not common to happen in prompt books, but
Yeah.
absolutely can. Imagine you have a prompt book that perhaps you have a prompt that needs to be slightly tweaked
Fine tuned. Yeah.
or yeah, fine tuned. Perfect. And then you might want to do that. Exactly. Yep.
And if you're
So,
not happy with the response, you can, I think there is a refresh button. Is that a refresh button? If you just scroll up, if, yeah,
yeah.
what is next to the edit? Is it like you get different response?
So, yeah, the resubmit prompt is about
Resubmit
getting a
prompt.
different response from the
Yeah.
model.
Okay.
This is very important as well because we're dealing with generative AI technology. We're talking
Yeah.
about non-deterministic technology these days, right?
Yeah.
So generative AI
Can you
can
explain
generate
what
different
is a
responses.
non? Can you explain what is a non-deterministic
Yes.
technology? What is it?
Yeah. So essentially, it's the difference between, well, deterministic being you get A plus B and you get a result of C. So you're
Yeah.
always going to get the same response from
Yeah.
performing an action.
Yeah.
This is deterministic. Non-deterministic means you're giving an input
Yeah.
or different entries, and you might get different results each time, right? So it's non-deterministic. We don't know what
Yeah.
the answer will be because the processing is different. And this is, of course, uh, an effect of how embeddings and tokens work on the back end on the large language models
Oh, thank you, Andre. I learned something
and
new.
vectors. Yeah. Cool. So it's still taking its time to go through everything in that prompt book. Now, after it's all done, like you said, I could continue to ask questions to Copilot for Security, or to finally generate a summary report if I was satisfied what I've seen, and of course the actions I took. In my case, I haven't taken any actions yet,
Mm-mm.
right? But I could go ahead and investigate, understand the spread of these files, understand well I have the executive summary right here,
Yeah.
but I could understand what was the spread of that file, those files, what devices were impacted. And this is exactly what's being explained here in the executive summary. So this is what an investigation could potentially look like with Copilot for Security.
Yeah.
And there is additional steps, right, that would perhaps be relevant to your organization. So think about how you might need to, of course, represent this some other way to your manager or investigation lead, incident leads, and then you can do that. Of course, you can leverage Copilot to ask cybersecurity questions as well. So what I'm asking is an open-ended question. Um,
Hmm.
it doesn't follow the best practices from prompts that we just saw a few minutes before, but I'm trying to learn a little bit about Copilot for security in this particular example. So the goal is open-ended as well. So the question I'm making is, what do you recommend I do next in this investigation as a SOC engineer? Just send it. And at this point, Sushan, we might need to have a look at the usage as well. I've already consumed my whole SCU,
Yeah.
right? So how long have we been using it? We've sent through 10 prompts or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah. The book consumed pretty much, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, the prompt book with 7 odd prompts consumed most of it.
Yeah.
So I've already used it. Okay, Sushan. So something I think it's worth visiting before we finish off is understanding about the usage.
Yeah.
So we just saw us executing a prompt book, going through some incidents Defender XDR. Next is to understand what has been used on the back end when we were doing all that. And for this, we can go to the usage and monitoring section of Copilot for Security.
Yeah.
So this here details essentially how many SCUs I have used each hour. Now, what's interesting here is, as we were just talking this morning, I've actually used zero point 0.8 SCUs in an hour, and for the last hour or so of conversation, we actually used a little more than what I'm allowed to. And this might happen. It allows a little burst. So it's reporting that I've used roughly 2.5 SCUs there. Now, the benefit of the portal is that you can keep track of your usage in your SOC per hour. These are 2 different hours. And at the bottom, you can see just a breakdown here of the unit usage as well. Okay. And if you need to burst it and you need to increase your capacity, you can do it from here too, right? So we can change the unit. Imagine I am going through an investigation and I absolutely need Copilot for security. I can increase that secure compute unit for that hour. I apply that new security compute unit, and that's hourly charge. It shows us the price per month as if we were going to continue to use those
Yeah.
two per month 24/7. We don't
Yeah.
have to. We can decrease that afterwards. Or if I'm happy with my investigations, I don't need Copilot. What I can also do is delete the SCU capacity so that
Yeah.
I'm not charged for next hours on the day or on that month as well.
So, all
Yeah,
right. So let's assume if I have used it for my work and now I want to delete it, where do I go? What do I do?
sure. So you can delete your compute unit from Azure. Let's open up Azure Copilot for Security again.
Yeah.
We just do that. So back in Azure, what I can do is essentially delete the resource, right? So I can just choose the resource that I want to delete. I can have
Yeah.
multiple resources. If I have, for example, different SOC team members or units that I would like each of them to use different compute units,
Yeah.
I can have that done that way. But also, essentially, what you can do is just go ahead and delete this, right? So you delete the resource, and for the next hour and onwards, you won't be charged for
Charged.
Copilot for security. Yeah.
Right. Tell me about what this is, what it can do. How can I use it on day to day life at my work to secure my product or solutions, things like that?
Okay, thanks for asking, Sushan. So, in order for us to explain what Copilot for Security is, I like to look at the challenges that we're trying to address. Now, what you're seeing on screen is actually the official documentation from Microsoft, going through what Copilot for Security is. And I highly recommend you have a thorough read through everything is in here. But
Yeah.
essentially, what Copilot for Security is, it helps SOC analysts with their daily tasks. When we look at challenges that Copilot for Security addresses, we're thinking of challenges that engineers and investigation leads in SOCs have to deal through daily. So when we're thinking about how Copilot for Security can help with summarization of incidents, uh,
Hmm.
addressing impact analysis of investigations that they're going through, reverse engineering scripts. We know that generative AI is great at analyzing, but also creating scripts, and reverse engineering scripts is a great use case for it.
Can
And
you
guided
please
response.
explain that bit, reverse engineering the script? What does it mean? Like, if somebody executed a script, it can understand like what are the paths it took. Um,
Absolutely. Yep.
yeah, yeah,
This is definitely it. So if you send a script over to it,
yeah.
it's able to make sense of it and explain each section of that script. So for
Wow.
a junior analyst, yeah,
Yeah,
for a junior analyst that is unfamiliar with potentially PowerShell or whatever script that they
yeah.
have to analyze, that is a big time saver. Just still on how Copilot for Security works, a little bit deeper into it, right?
Yeah.
This image is a great explanation of it. It's very
Okay.
detailed. I'm not going to
Yeah.
get into all the flow right now, but
Yeah.
imagine Copilot for Security leverages the information that you currently have in your SOC,
Yeah.
and think of every information you have in your SOC. So not just Microsoft security technology. Think of potentially open source information that you're currently gathering from third-party plugins. That think of even other vendor solutions that we're creating plugins to work with Copilot for Security. All of those data sources can be
Hmm.
essentially plugged into Copilot for Security. And from an analyst perspective, Copilot will make it easier for them to, well, interact with all these different data sources. And I love that Copilot is that natural language layer of access into all these data sources, right? Something
Hmm.
that is unparalleled and wasn't available until technology such as Copilot for Security came along. Now, when Copilot for Security has access to all these different data sources, it can reason over them. Copilot for Security is not just ChatGPT
Hmm.
for security, right? It's not just a fine tuned model for security. It's much more than
Hmm.
that. It is a complex AI system that utilizes different layers of approach to understand what you're asking in a prompt and
Hmm.
what plugins it should action at each stage.
Right.
Now, this image represents all that,
All
and
right.
it also highlights, and this is very important here, Sushan, the responsible AI layer that Microsoft embeds into all our products, all our
Yeah.
AI products, right? I'm sure you talk a lot about it when you talk about Copilot for Microsoft 365, but essentially, responsible AI leads how we deliver some of the capabilities of Microsoft Copilot for Security, but it also is embedded into every output that the solution uh, creates. So
Right.
before an output is generated, there's always a check that is run on the output from the Azure OpenAI LLM that's used in the platform. As you can see, there's a representation here,
Yeah.
and only after the check is run and no harm is actually found in the output, the response is sent back to your analyst.
All right, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Andre, for giving us an overview. And for anybody who's trying to learn Microsoft Copilot for security, this is a great place to start. And thank you so much. Any closing thoughts?
No, look, I just appreciate your time, Sushan, and your invite. And for anyone wanting to learn more about Copilot for Security, always recommend the public resources from Microsoft. They're always up to date. They are the best resource for anyone trying to find out more about Microsoft's technologies, or of course your representative. Maybe I'm your representative, so yeah, reach out.
Yeah. Even though both of us work at Microsoft, none of the things what we have shared is what Microsoft saying. It's our personal opinion about whatever we shared.
That is, yes, absolutely. These are my learnings, and nothing is confidential from this conversation. So, yeah.
Once again, thank you so much. This is the first guest I ever had in my channel. Hopefully, this is start of something new, and hopefully, we will be able to bring Andre in. If you have more questions, please let me know. I'm happy to bring him in for other topics as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sushan. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.